Hi, I am here with Dan Tepfer, who is going to be here at the Live Art Studio this Wednesday night. And we are so excited because he's going to play his program on Inventions. And Dan, we were just talking about the last time you were in Annapolis, which is way too long ago. We both kind of thought it was like 3 years, and it turns out it was 8 years. And I can promise you, my friend, we will not allow that to happen again. We will make sure we get you here right away. Um, and for those of you who weren't here or don't remember seeing Dan or haven't had a chance to look at the video that we shared on our e-blast yesterday, I think it was. Um, you should really go look at the e-blast before this one because Dan really does an amazing job of explaining um, the about how this concert works, what he's going to do. So Dan, welcome.
Thank you, Ernie. I'm really excited to come back.
Yeah. So how did you come up with this program?
Yeah, well, it's a really long story because it really goes back to my childhood. I grew up in Paris. I went to the conservatory there, and I was kind of obsessively improvising jazz at home all the time. But I went to the conservatory from the age of 6, basically. And of course, I played the Bach Inventions, and I loved playing them as a kid. And then of course, I worked on the well-tempered clavier, and then in my 20s, I started learning the Goldberg variations. Ended up putting this record, Goldberg Variations, out in 2011, which is the program I performed in Annapolis last time I was there in October 2016. And that's all to say that while being a jazz musician, which is what I am, really, like, that's my core competence, and I've been lucky enough to play with some of the great jazz musicians. I always kept this really close connection and rapport with Bach, and he's my hero. Not the only one, of course. So, uh, what happened after I put out the Goldberg Variations record in 2011 is it kind of became surprisingly successful, and I got these offers to tour it all over Europe and then all around the world.
Right.
And in the process of doing that, it was like the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. Night after night, getting up and playing this incredibly difficult masterpiece, which, in many ways, as somebody who's like really spent most of his time trying to be a good improviser, is like this daunting. But I've since learned that it's daunting for classical musicians too.
Yeah. Well, I have to tell you, so when you and I met, I heard this and I still actually listen to that recording because I am not a keyboardist, I'm not a pianist. But the Goldberg is a piece for me that's sort of a musical touchstone that I look at from sort of an academic perspective as opposed to a performing perspective. And I remember when I first heard your approach to it, I got to the point, and this is really I'm about to commit a sacrilege here, but it's a good thing it's compliment to you. I found myself gravitating towards your improvisations of the variations more than the variations. Um, and I thought that, and when you were down here for the concert, I actually remembered people saying to me afterwards, I think I really liked Dan's improvisations.
Mm.
I really like to hear, I enjoyed hearing those live more than the rest of the piece. And it's not to say that it's not to take anything away from the Bach, but I think to me, what it said was, here's somebody, taking a piece that we know so well. It's been with us. I mean, the number of conversations I've had with other people about the Goldberg variations um, over the years is really astonishing. And the fact that we take this piece that's part of our DNA and you make it new is pretty cool.
I just feel like it's interesting to respond to things. In fact, our whole life is responding to things. Like we are born with a certain character, a certain DNA, certain predispositions in life, and we spend our lives responding to that, and then responding to all of the things that life throws at us. And I find it interesting to take something, especially something totemic like the Goldberg variations and respond to it. So, to get back to, well, first of all, just about what you were saying, I think for me, performing the Goldberg variations is almost like penance. It's like, and then when I'm improvising, it's like, now I can just do what I want.
Oh, interesting.
So that may be part of what you and other audience members might have felt. I
You
see it
know,
in videos of myself when when I'm performing that program, when I'm playing the Bach, I'm just like, like I try not to be terrified, and I've gotten a lot better with that over the years. But my body language is real, is I don't want to say rigid. I hope it's not rigid, but anyway, when I start improvising, I'm just like loose and, and just expressing myself from the heart. And I would like to get to the point where I can play the Bach with that same kind of spirit, but it is really hard. And in the meantime, it is penance for me. It's like,
yeah.
have to go to the well. The well is very difficult. And then I get to play around like a child, I want to get back to your initial question, which was like, how did this program that I'm playing on Wednesday,
Right,
Inventions,
right, right.
Reinventions, come about? And so what happened is Goldberg Variations came out. It was a surprise success, and I ended up having these gigs, and I'm touring it a lot. And it's like the hardest thing I've ever done. And I come back finally to New York, and I know that I need to understand this music better. I'm a jazz musician, so I think, I have a pretty solid understanding of harmony and various ways that music works, but I need to understand Bach's music better. So I
Right.
found a counterpoint and harmony teacher in New York, Paul Caputo. You may have heard of
Oh,
him,
yeah.
actually.
Very famous. Yeah.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful teacher. Changed my life. And I took private lessons with him. I'd done harmony and counterpoint in college, of course, but
Right.
you can only go so deep in college unless you're spending a lot of time on it. And I took lessons with him for, I think, about 3 years, and just completely rewired my brain. And in
Wow.
terms of like how music functions, just one of the most wonderful things I've done. And one of the things that came out of that was I started looking at Bach's music in a really different way, because I would look at pieces, and I would actually be able to understand the mechanisms. Maybe, surely not everything that's happening, but like so much more than I understood before. The kind of various different kinds of mechanisms that make it
Right.
function.
Right.
Um, and the thing that the pieces of Bach's that gave me the most in that respect ended up being the Inventions. What's fascinating about the Inventions is, in particular, the two voice Inventions, is that they are kind of purposely unformulaic. They're much less formulaic than, for example, a fugue,
Right.
or even than a prelude. They are very free, and Bach found this wonderful title for them, Inventions. I mean, how did he come up with that? It's actually a term he got from rhetoric, and that's really, it's so wonderful, because these pieces are, on the one hand, they're made for kids. They're made even for small children. I mean, they can be played by a talented 7-year-old. And on the other hand, they're incredibly profound, and what became kind of evident for me in this renewed study of this music is that, in Bach's music, maybe even more so than other people's music, but certainly probably in all music, there's a skin and there's bones underneath the skin.
Right.
And in the Inventions, by design, he keeps the skin exceedingly simple. I mean, it's just these two melodies
Right.
in a conversation, one in each hand, nothing fancy, nothing like what's happening in the Goldbergs, where it's all virtuosic and you have this crazy hand crossing and stuff. It's very simple, but the skin is simple. The mechanisms underneath are incredibly profound and
Huh.
robust. And that's what makes them so great. That's why we're still playing this incredibly,
Right.
in simple music, 300 years later. By the way, last year, 2023 was the 300th anniversary of the fair copy of the Inventions by Bach.
Really?
So yeah, so they're 301 years old. So anyway, I'm studying the Inventions. I'm just getting like so many. It's so rewarding for me, because I feel like things are being unlocked in
Mhm.
terms of works. And suddenly I have this kind of insight, which actually I haven't seen anybody else talk about it quite in this way. So people talk about the inventions with relation to rhetoric.
Right.
In particular, this idea that the title invention is inventio in Latin, and that is one of the stages of rhetoric. In rhetoric, it really symbolizes idea. It's like you have an idea, and then you have to figure out how to elaborate this
Right.
idea, how to convince, how to perform, how to memorize, like all these stages of rhetoric in order to come up with a finished piece of rhetoric. And so Bach is very clearly making the analogy with music. I come up with an idea. So idea might be just a simple melody. That might be my idea. And then I elaborate it. How do I elaborate it? Well, in that first invention in C major, I transform it in various ways. So a lot of the time in that invention, it's actually upside down in inversion.
Right.
But also I take it on this harmonic journey, through not only diatonic chords of the local key and secondary dominance, the point of those chords, but I actually modulate to related keys. And he does this all in the space of like, a minute and a half, which is also one of the wonderful things about the inventions. So anyway, this is how the inventions are usually talked about. And the thing that struck me is that I think at the end of the day, this is really about storytelling.
Hmm.
Um, you think about the way stories are typically structured in every single Hollywood movie, but also going all the way back to the ancient Greeks, is this idea that we call classical narrative structure. And in classical narrative structure, which in some ways every story could be said to fit this mold, although probably not all, but most. You first meet a protagonist, so this would be a character of some kind,
Hmm.
uh, and you usually meet them in a place of safety, like in their home, or in a place where it's just of normalcy, of things being easy and not dangerous. And that's Act One. We get to know our protagonist, and then something happens. There's an inciting event, and beginning of Act Two, our protagonist is thrust into the unknown, and immediately, if Act One has done its job, we care about the protagonist at this point,
Right.
and we are led to empathetically wonder if they're going to be okay, because they're now thrust into the mountains of Mordor or whatever,
Right.
and we really would love for them to make it home, and we're really curious about how they're going to get home, and invariably they go through trials and tribulations, and then third act, if they're lucky, we find them back home, and lo and behold, the analogy with what Bach is doing in the Inventions is absolute. I mean, we meet our protagonist in a place of safety at home in the home key, and the protagonist is usually a short melody, but Bach uses various strategies for developing these musical protagonists in the Inventions. Anyway, this musical idea, we meet them at home, and then something happens, and suddenly we're somewhere else. We're in the dominant. We're in the relative major. If it's in the
Right.
minor, and it's like, are we ever going to make it home? Because we know we're somewhere else now. And this is the thing that's so powerful here, is that I think the harmonic landscape of tonal harmony, of this system of tonal harmony that
Right.
emerged over hundreds of years, is a very real kind of abstract landscape. Like when the listener is in there, I believe that it feels real in a way that, like, if a chord just kind of goes randomly to another chord, it doesn't.
Right.
Like,
Right.
that's just surface. But if you're in this system of tonal harmony, you're in an actual world,
Right.
just like in a movie or in
Right.
a play or in a novel.
Right.
So this idea that Bach is actually telling us how to tell a story in music in the Inventions was extremely inspiring to me, and I started to think to myself, I would love to be able to improvise this, because I've always loved free improvisation since I was a kid,
Right.
and I grew up loving Keith Jarrett. Free improvisation is a
Yeah.
big influence on me, and I've done free improvisation my whole life, but a lot of the time I felt kind of like I was like a horse with blinders on.
Right.
Like, I'm here, I know I'm here, but like all I can see is, oh, I'd like to go over there,
Yeah.
or I'd like to go over there. And suddenly, when you think about it in this other way of this analogy of classical narrative structure, you exist in a really exciting and vast and kind of infinite world of real possibilities. So it's kind
Right,
of like you're making your movie and you're, you know, in Mordor or whatever, and there's
right,
literally a mountain over there that you could
right,
go to, and there's another mountain over there that you could go to, and you know what? They're both amazing.
right,
Um, and it's kind of you can just choose,
right,
and so that idea was incredibly exciting to me, and I started practicing this. It was very hard for me because really nothing in jazz, in the way that we think about jazz, prepares you for thinking about improvisation this way. So like, it was a completely new thing for me, and I don't think I think probably Keith Jarrett has thought about this to a certain extent, but it's certainly not part of standard jazz teaching at all.
right.
Took me a really long time to get my head around this at all, like 7 or 8 years of practice, and then I started getting, I don't want to say comfortable, but like starting to the point where I could tell a story, I could improvise a story using these ideas. And by the way, it doesn't sound anything like Bach. I mean, I'm not trying to sound like Bach. It's
No, no,
really
no,
using
this,
abstract principles, right, of storytelling. But I also thought it'd be really fun to tie this with the music that inspired it,
right,
uh, the inventions, which are deceptively difficult, and also so simple. And the wonderful thing is that Bach only wrote 15 inventions, and they're
mhm,
all in different major and minor keys. And remember, in 1722, the year before, he published the Well-Tempered
well
Clavier,
tempered,
which is
sure,
all 24 major and minor keys.
right,
So here he publishes, or he doesn't publish, but he makes the fair copy of the Inventions in 1723, and he only writes 15. And the reason he only wrote 15 is obvious. He didn't want to trouble his young students and his young son
right,
with exotic keys. It's like we can stick to the 15 most used keys.
right,
But to me, it was like, oh, he left open a window.
right.
There's 9 missing keys. And
That's,
so
yeah,
I can improvise inventions for those 9 missing keys. So that's what I'm going to be doing on Wednesday. I played the inventions as written for the 15 keys
right,
that he wrote in, and then as I'm going up chromatically, C major, C
right,
minor,
right.
for the missing keys, I improvise an invention, and I'm improvising it really anew every
Each
time,
time,
and that's like
yeah.
a very essential commitment of this project.
Well, that is amazing. I cannot wait to see it Wednesday night here in Annapolis. And this program that's built around Bach's inventions is going to be really cool. Once again, Dan Tepfer, you are amazing as you sort of take us on these wonderful journeys that, begin with something familiar and take us to wonderful places. So I'm excited you're back here joining us.
Well, thanks so much for having me, and I'm really excited to discover this new space you have. Before we started recording, I was just saying how much I admire people who just like take over a space and make music happen. That's a beautiful thing to do.
Thanks. I appreciate. Well, when you see it, I mean, we have music going on in here, whether it's a rehearsal or something else, pretty much 6 days a week, 5 days a week. So we're here all the time. So
Awesome.
anyway, all right, my friend, I will see you Wednesday night, 7:30 here, Live Art Studio at Westfield, Annapolis. And if you want to get tickets ahead of time, you can go to liveartsmd.org and look for Dan Tepfer and his program on inventions. And otherwise, you can just buy tickets at the door and you can get a glass of wine and sit and listen to some great music, which is what I plan on doing. All right, Dan, take care. I'll see you on Wednesday.
Thanks so much.